Far beyond the spinning blue planet Earth, a massive research station hovered in the silence of deep space like a silent guardian of knowledge. The station, named Relay 9, was home to scientists and explorers from dozens of species who worked together in pursuit of discovery. Among them was an alien girl named Lura. Her skin held a soft lavender tone, her eyes deep and reflective like still water. She belonged to a species known for precision thought, emotionless logic, and tightly controlled biological rhythms. They did not understand chaos. They avoided anything unpredictable. Their society was built on order and balance. But Lura had always been a little different. She was curious about things her kind avoided. She often wandered into questions that had no answer. That's why she volunteered for Earth sample research when others from her planet refused to touch it. Today, she entered Lab Chamber 6, a quiet sealed room filled with samples from Earth's atmosphere. Her task was simple: review the molecular structure of airborne compounds, isolate unknown particles, and run compatibility tests. Nothing dangerous, nothing new, or so it seemed. She began her scans with focus as usual. The machines hummed softly. Monitors blinked. Robotic arms moved with perfect rhythm. One of the samples was a preserved air unit taken from a human forest during rainfall. Earth air was strange, wild, full of life and decay all mixed together. Her kind considered it chaotic, but she found it fascinating. Lura placed the container into the analysis chamber and started the scan. Suddenly there was a soft hiss. A malfunction in the seal. Barely noticeable, but enough. A tiny puff of Earth's air escaped from the containment. Just a small breath, almost nothing. But Lura was close. She breathed it in without realizing. It touched her senses like a whisper of something ancient and alive. A strange warmth moved through her. Not painful, not dangerous, but different. Her eyes blinked slowly. Her focus shifted. She shook her head to clear her thoughts and resumed the scan. But something was off. Within minutes, her skin temperature began to rise. Not feverish, but warm. Her pulse increased. The air in the room suddenly felt thick. Her breathing changed. Her fingertips tingled as if touched by invisible threads. She tried to continue her work but found herself distracted. Her thoughts lost their shape. Focus dissolved into something else. Something wild. She placed both hands on the table and tried to steady herself. What was happening? She had no illness, no condition, no known allergies to Earth compounds. Yet her body was reacting. She opened her internal monitor and checked her vitals. Heartbeat accelerated. Hormone levels climbing. Neural activity spiking in unfamiliar patterns. She pressed her palm to the scanner and tried to log a report, but the AI assistant only marked the data as a minor anomaly. No alerts, no emergency. She knew better. This was not normal. She closed the chamber and stepped back from the console. The sensation was growing stronger. Heat pooled in her core and moved outward like a tide. Her balance shifted. Her senses expanded. Sounds became sharper. The quiet hum of the lab felt like thunder in her ears. She could hear the distant footsteps of someone walking in the main hallway, and for some reason, those steps pulled her attention like gravity. She left the lab without knowing why. Her thoughts drifted like leaves in a current. Her instincts began to whisper things her mind did not understand. Her people did not speak of such things. Heat was a scheduled event managed through chemical regulators and timing systems. It was not random. It was never uncontrolled. But her body was entering it now, without warning, without cause. And with it came something deeper, a craving. Not just physical, something that gripped her nerves and soul at once. She entered her quarters and locked the door. Lights dimmed around her. She sat on the edge of the bed and tried to think, but thinking was slipping away from her. What was in that air? She reviewed the file again. It had been collected from a dense forest after rain. mixed with plant life, soil, pollen, and something else. Human scent. Trace levels. Unfiltered. That must be it. Her biology had never been exposed to it before. Her kind used suits during contact, always protected. This was the first time she breathed it directly. And now something deep in her was reacting. Her chest rose and fell faster. Her hands trembled. Her thoughts tried to form logic, but logic shattered under the waves of sensation crashing through hers. Tried to suppress it, focus, meditate, control, but her body did not listen. Her skin flushed with energy. Her eyes burned with strange tears. Her temperature reached the threshold for biological heat phase. I finally recognized it. A red alert blinked in her room, but no one was authorized to help. Heat was a private matter among her kind, but this was not natural. This was not following the rules. This was triggered, artificial, uncharted. Her heart pounded as a new wave rolled through her, and she curled into herself, breathing heavily, her mind screaming for stillness that would not come then. Something outside caught her attention. A soft sound, a voice, human, friendly, it passed her door. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. That voice, that scent, she could feel it even through the wall. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed, her muscles locked. Her heart reacted. Like a signal was sent through space and time. She recognized the scent. It matched the one from the sample. A human technician. He was nearby. And her body responded like he was a missing piece of something she never knew existed. She pressed her back against the wall and shut her eyes tight, trying to block it out, but the warmth spread further through her limbs. Her body was no longer her own. It moved with ancient instincts that no scientist ever studied. She whispered to herself quietly in her language, trying to find calm. But her biology had turned against her. It had chosen its path. The scent of the human had lit a fire she could not extinguish. And now the heat was here, real, unstoppable, and growing stronger with every second. Her world had changed in a single breath. The station's long corridor stretched in silence, broken only by the quiet hum of electric panels and the soft rhythmic steps of those walking through it. Far from the noise of engines or the chatter of the common areas, Lura remained locked inside her room, battling something she did not understand. The warmth inside her had not faded. Instead, it had settled into her muscles, into her breath, into her bones. Her thoughts no longer moved with smooth clarity. They turned in circles, tangled in questions she could not answer. Her hands shook every time she tried to hold the tablet and type a report. The words refused to align. Her language systems kept returning errors. This was not just distraction. This was something deeper, pulling her attention away from logic and toward instinct. She tried to sleep, but her dreams were no longer peaceful. They came full of lights and shapes and smells. Every dream carried the sound of a human voice, even when no one spoke. Every breath brought back the strange scent she had first inhaled in the lab. She tried to cleanse her skin with chemical scrubs. She adjusted the filters in her room. She even changed her clothing 3 times, thinking maybe the scent had attached itself to her body somehow, but nothing helped. The connection had already formed. Her body knew it. Her nervous system had recorded it. And now the scent lived inside her mind like a fire with no fuel, yet still burning. The next morning she stood in front of the mirror and saw something unfamiliar. Her reflection looked like her, but softer. The glow in her skin was brighter. Her eyes carried a depth she had never seen before. She tilted her head and touched her neck, where her pulse raced with every heartbeat. It was undeniable now. Her body had entered heat, unscheduled, unregulated, entirely triggered by the human scent. Her kind had studied biology for generations. Yet nothing in their records mentioned this possibility. No cross-species reaction had ever been documented like this. Heat was supposed to begin through a hormonal schedule, after specific triggers approved by their health council. But this heat had bloomed from one breath of air, and now it showed no signs of stopping. Across the station, a human technician named Mark moved through his routine, unaware of the chaos building behind closed doors. He ran maintenance checks on the climate systems, reviewed the status of the artificial gravity, and replaced 2 damaged filters in the lower lab section. His day followed a simple rhythm guided by tasks and quiet music playing through his ear chip. He liked the calm. He liked the station's quiet order. He never imagined someone was thinking about him constantly, or that his voice or scent could change someone's biology. When he passed by the living quarters that morning, he barely noticed the way one door sensor blinked softly in low alert mode. He didn't know it was Lura's room inside her quarters. Lura heard the sound of his footsteps. Her hearing had become so sharp that she could sense each movement with disturbing clarity. Her fingers curled tightly against her sleeves as the fire in her chest deepened. Her body responded to his presence, even when her mind begged it to stop. She did not want this. She had never desired any connection with another being. Her species did not believe in romance or emotional closeness. They considered it a distraction from the pursuit of knowledge. But now her breath shortened every time he passed by, and her thoughts twisted into patterns she could not control. She tried one final time to report her condition through the AI system. She activated her health scan interface and stood completely still as it ran through her vitals. The data confirmed elevated heat phase indicators, rapid hormonal changes, unstable neural patterns, and emotional surge detection. The AI paused but offered no emergency response. According to its database, she was not in danger. She was simply undergoing a strong biological cycle. It recommended rest, hydration, and temperature control. But it did not understand. This was not a cycle. This was a transformation, and it had already crossed the line between natural and unknown. She knew she could not remain isolated for long. Protocol required regular presence in common areas, or else a wellness officer would be sent to check. She could not let that happen. If anyone from her species discovered her state, they would remove her from the station instantly and place her under biological correction therapy. She would lose her research position, her freedom, and possibly her memory if they deemed it necessary. Her people did not tolerate deviation. She had to act normal, pretend, hide the fire, walk the halls like nothing was wrong, even if every cell in her body screamed otherwise. Later that day, she left her room wearing her research uniform and a small sensory blocker over her neck. She walked slowly, eyes focused ahead, every step practiced and precise. But as soon as she entered the central corridor, she felt it again. The scent, faint in the recycled air but strong enough to hit her senses like a storm wind. Mark was nearby. She turned sharply and almost collided with him near the analysis chamber. He smiled politely and stepped aside, giving her space. His voice was calm. "Hey there, everything all right? You don't look so great." Her response was delayed, her throat dry, her heartbeat racing. "Yes, I am fine, just lack of rest. Minor fluctuations, nothing serious, thank you." She moved past him quickly, but her legs felt weak. Her hands trembled again. Her skin burned hotter under her uniform. The sensory blocker was failing. It could not stop her body from responding. Mark watched her walk away, puzzled by her sudden tension. He did not follow. He returned to his task. But for Lura, the encounter had left a deep mark. Her body surged with new energy, and her mind cracked under the pressure. This could not continue. If she kept seeing him, if she kept breathing the same air, her heat would escalate to the next stage, and then she would lose all control. That night the dreams returned stronger than before. Her mind created images of his face, his voice, his hands. Not in the way of desire, but in the way of instinct. Her species did not have love the way humans described it, but they had bonding, and that bond was beginning to form. She woke in a sweat, gripping the sheets, her chest rising and falling like waves. She needed a solution. Either she found a way to suppress her biology, or she had to leave the station. But part of her already knew it was too late for either. Something had been awakened inside her, and it was not going back to sleep. The station continued its silent journey through the black sea of stars, while inside its quiet walls, Lura walked with growing confusion in her steps and a storm in her blood. Her daily path had changed. Every task that once brought her comfort now slipped from her hands like water through open fingers. The machines no longer obeyed her commands with ease. Her readings blurred. Her calculations faltered. Her body sat in the lab, but her mind wandered endlessly around one presence that haunted her senses. That presence was Mark, the human who had no idea he was the reason her system was unbalanced and her identity shaken from its core. She had avoided him for days, kept her path away from his route, but the station was too small to escape for long. Every shared air system, every echo of a footstep, every faint leftover scent in the corridor reminded her of him. Not because she wanted him in any romantic sense, but because her body was rewriting its own rhythm around his signal. It was as if her instincts had found something ancient buried inside the scent of humans, something that echoed deep into her species, past something never spoken or understood. Her kind did not allow such thoughts to surface. Emotion was weakness. Desire was illness. Bonds outside regulation were punished, but Lura had lost control. Her biology had made the choice without her. The scent had triggered something her ancestors had buried long ago, and now it ruled her. With fire and hunger. Not hunger for touch or closeness, but hunger for balance. Her body saw Mark as a missing link in a chemical chain, a key to a lock that should never have existed. And the more she fought it, the more the heat inside her spread. Through every part of her being, she spent hours studying her medical scans alone in the lab, hoping to find answers. Her hormone levels were not just elevated, they were climbing in patterns unknown to her species. Her neural activity created spirals never seen in their records. Her dreams began to invade her waking hours. She saw his face in the reflection of the lab glass, heard his voice in the quiet hum of machines. She tried artificial blockers. She applied cooling agents. She even used deep meditation systems, but none of it worked. Her core remained in constant fire. Every time he came close, the reaction surged again and again, like a wave returning to shore, no matter how many times it crashed. One afternoon, while she adjusted the sensor grid in the lower-level lab, Mark appeared without warning. He held a toolkit and a relaxed smile, unaware of the way her hands clenched at her sides when he entered. He greeted her with the same gentle voice he always used and began his repair work nearby, humming softly to himself. Lura kept her eyes locked on the screen in front of her, but her senses betrayed her. She could feel his warmth across the room, even though they never touched. Her skin prickled. Her heart raced. Her breath refused to stay steady. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of her inner pressure. He turned and asked her if she needed help with her system, but she shook her head quickly too, afraid that even his nearness would push her past the point of return. She barely managed to whisper, "No thank you," before rushing out of the lab, her balance unsteady, her vision cloudy with heat and shame. She collapsed onto the floor of a storage room one level above, gripping her chest as waves of unfamiliar sensation pulsed through her. Her mind shouted for control, but her body refused to obey. She whispered her name over and over, as if that would pull her back into herself, but nothing worked. She had become a stranger in her own skin that night. She made decision. If the station logs this condition for another cycle, her people will intervene. They will scan her biology and find the bond forming, and once they find it, she will be removed and isolated for study, or worse, they might erase this entire experience from her memory to prevent emotional corruption. She could not allow that. She needed to understand what was happening, not just for herself, but for all future contact between her kind and humans. This could be the beginning of something new, or the discovery of something long forgotten. Either way, she had to keep it hidden long enough to finish her own research. She began keeping private notes stored in an encrypted section of her personal system. She recorded every change in her temperature, every emotional fluctuation, every time she heard Mark's voice or caught his scent. She cross-referenced it with Earth biology and discovered something strange. Human scent molecules contained traces of natural compounds that her species had once used in primitive bonding rituals before those rituals were banned and erased from history. No one knew why they stopped. The records were lost. But now she had evidence that her body still remembered those ancient responses and was activating them again through the human presence. The idea both terrified and fascinated her. It meant her species had once allowed bonds driven by instinct, not regulation. It meant emotions were not a flaw, but a forgotten part of their evolution. And it meant that Mark, without knowing, it had opened a door her kind had sealed long ago. She began to watch him not with craving, but with curiosity. His behavior was gentle, his actions consistent. He treated every being with equal respect. He never pushed, never stared, never crossed boundaries. He showed kindness simply because it was part of who he was. One evening she found herself outside the hydroponic garden just as he entered. They stood facing opposite directions, separated by a row of glowing green plants. The air between them was still. The scent was stronger here, rich with organic life. Her fingers touched the smooth leaves as her thoughts tumbled like rain inside her head. He spoke softly from the other side, asking if she had ever seen earth trees in real form. She answered yes, once in simulation, but never in reality. He said they smelled like life and old memories, and sometimes even like hope. Her breath caught as that word echoed through her. Hope, something her species rarely used. Something she never understood until now. Her heart slowed for a moment. The fire inside her paused, not because the heat was gone, but because something else had risen. Something deeper. A connection beyond scent, beyond biology. A quiet understanding. And for the first time since her heat began, she felt no fear. Just stillness. Just awareness. She returned to her room that night, not cured, but changed. Her biology still burned, her body still reacted, but her mind had found a thread of clarity. The scent had triggered the heat, but the emotion was unlocking something greater. A bond that was not forced, not mechanical, but born from shared presence, from small moments, from choice. And now she had a question no science could answer. Could a bond formed by accident still be real if it grows from understanding instead of desire? She did not know yet. But she was ready to find out. The days on the station passed slowly, while the stars outside kept shining with the same silent glow. But everything inside Lura was changing with every hour that moved forward. Her body now fully entered the final stage of heat, where the fire inside no longer flickered quietly, but burned in full brightness without pause or mercy. Her skin had taken on a faint glow, visible only in darkness. Her breath remained heavy, even when she was still, and her thoughts no longer moved in calm lines, but spun in circles like wind caught in a storm. Her system was no longer fighting the reaction, it had surrendered to it, and she knew that soon her mental stability would collapse under the full pressure she avoided. Contact with others. She stopped attending shared meetings. She sent pre-recorded messages in place of live reports. But the station AI noticed the pattern and logged her behavior as irregular. Her people's monitoring systems back home began asking for updates. She had only a few cycles left before a full wellness check would be enforced. And that meant someone would come to her door and read her vitals and find everything she had been hiding since that first breath of human scent. She did not fear punishment as much as she feared losing the experience, because she had never felt so real, so aware, so alive. And even through the pain and confusion, part of her wanted to stay exactly in this moment, where the bond had begun to bloom. Mark had noticed her absence. He had asked others if she was unwell, but received no clear answer. His path eventually brought him to the lab where she once worked. He stood in the center of the silent room, surrounded by dark monitors and empty chairs. He looked at the corner where her tools remained untouched, a place that once carried her quiet energy, now hollow. He sighed softly and left a small message on her terminal. Just a simple line: "Hope you are all right here. If you need anything, no pressure." Just wanted to say that. The message reached her late at night when the heat inside had reached its highest peak. Her hands trembled as she read the words. Her eyes refused to blink. Her heart beat so fast it echoed in her ears. The message had no demand, no question, no expectation, just presence and care, and that broke something open inside her. She fell to her knees with no sound in the room and allowed her body to feel the weight of all that had been building inside her. It was not about attraction, it was not about bonding, it was about connection, something her kind had buried long ago, something stronger than regulation or instruction. She knew she could not continue hiding. The reaction was no longer internal. Her body had begun releasing faint waves of pheromones into the air, invisible and undetectable by human senses but clear to station systems. Her heat phase triggered environmental alerts. The air scrubbers began overcompensating. The temperature sensors flagged odd fluctuations. The command AI flagged the incident as a possible contamination and requested investigation within 6 hours. Someone would come, and when they arrived, they would discover everything. Her breathing grew heavy, her legs weak. She collapsed. Again, this time not on the floor of her room, but in the corridor outside the lower lab, unable to stand. Her limbs felt like liquid, her vision dimmed. The heat had pushed her beyond her limits, and now her body begged for relief, but she could not give it, because the only thing that would reset the heat cycle was physical bonding, and that was something she did not want unless it came from truth and choice and not instinct alone. Footsteps came through the corridor, fast, steady, purposeful. Then they stopped near her. A voice called her name, not in command, but in concern. Then hands reached down and lifted her, gently holding her with care, not fear. She looked up into the face she had seen in her thoughts for days, Mark's face full of quiet worry. He asked no questions. He said nothing grand. He only whispered, "You are burning up. We need to get you help." She tried to speak, but her throat failed. Her heat wrapped around her lungs. She could only shake her head, weakly, tears sliding from her eyes, not from pain, but from the helplessness of being seen in this state. She wanted to explain everything, but had no words left. She expected him to back away, to leave her to call the med team, but he did not. Instead, he carried her carefully through the empty hall, down into the backup med bay, a room rarely used, private and silent. He placed her on the resting unit and adjusted the cooling frame without waiting for instructions. He had learned enough to understand something was happening inside her that no machine could fix. She reached for his hand without thinking, and he gave it to her without hesitation. Their skin touched for the first time, and her body reacted, but not with wild heat, instead with calm waves that began to soften. Her breath, her pulse slowed, her mind cleared just enough to let her speak, and she whispered, "This is not a disease. This is not human. This is my biology, and it is breaking me from inside." He did not ask why or how. He simply nodded and said, "Then let me help you hold it together until it passes if I can. I do not know what you need, but I will stay here and not leave if that brings you peace." And it did bring peace, not because he had the answer, but because he was present in a way no one from her world had ever been present with her. He stayed beside her for hours, saying nothing, only holding her hand when her body trembled, breathing slowly when she forgot how to breathe, matching her rhythm without effort. And in that silent, still room, her heat began to cool, not because it had completed its cycle, but because her heart had found something it needed more than release. It had found understanding. Outside the medbay, the station continued to hum. The alerts remained on hold. The air systems returned to normal, and somewhere in the data streams, the AI recorded the event as stabilized without knowing how it had happened, because the system could not measure the power of empathy or the effect of a quiet human hand on a burning alien soul. But far away on her homeworld, the council did not accept the report so easily. They demanded answers. They sent direct orders to remove Lura from the station for detailed biological examination. They viewed her condition as corruption. a threat to balance a risk to their image and authority. They would arrive within one solar day to collect her, and Mark would have no right to intervene. Lura received the message in the final hours of rest, her heat now fading, her body weak, but her thoughts stronger than ever. And as she read the council's decision, she knew one thing with complete clarity. If they took her, she would lose everything she had found and everything she had become. And that was something she could no longer allow. The moment had come to choose obedience or truth. And she knew her answer would not be accepted by her people, but it would be the one her heart had already made quietly in the dark when a human held her hand and did not let go. The artificial sunrise lit the edge of the station's upper wing slowly and gently as the star's light poured through the reinforced glass panels, turning cold metal into a canvas of golden warmth. But inside the quiet medbay where Lura rested, time had taken on a different shape. Her eyes remained half closed, but her mind was no longer lost in the deep heat that once trapped her. Her body had cooled, her pulse found a steady rhythm, her breath moved in soft waves, her skin no longer glowed with unbearable fire. It was still warm, but now it held calm inside instead of chaos. She sat upright for the first time in what felt like days, her limbs weak but her thoughts stronger than before. Her voice returned, slowly, carried by quiet courage, and behind every word came awareness that the moment for decisions had arrived. Mark had not left her side. His presence remained unchanged, not driven by duty or sympathy, but by something deeper, something honest and unspoken. His kindness had never been loud, and his care never demanded thanks. He stayed through her silence, through her trembling, through the hours when her body fought against itself. He listened when she spoke without asking for explanation, and when she broke down in confusion and fear, he held space for her to feel everything without judgment. Now he looked at her and smiled, not with victory, but with relief that she had come back from the edge. She thanked him not with long speeches, but with a soft nod and words full of quiet weight. "I am still here because of you," he answered with a slight shake of the head. "You were always here. You just needed someone to remind you were not alone." Their hands touched again, not with urgency, but with ease. Her fingers no longer trembled, her body no longer recoiled. Her heat had passed, but something else remained, something that was not chemical or biological. It was the connection they had formed in the middle of a strange and unexpected storm, something fragile yet strong, something born not from instinct, but from choice. But peace never stayed long when old systems stood behind locked doors. The council ship arrived exactly on schedule, its form sharp and gleaming, slicing through the black sky with precision. It docked without delay, and their message came cold and formal. Subject: Lura will be removed from Station Relay 9 effective immediately. Further details will be delivered upon arrival. She is to be taken for containment and genetic recalibration to ensure she no longer carries the effects of cross-species exposure. Their decision was final, their tone unquestionable, their laws clear, and Lura knew what it meant. She had lived her whole life under their structure. She had served their rules and walked their path, and now they came to erase everything she had just discovered about herself. She stood slowly from the medbay chair, walked to the mirror, and saw a new reflection. Not just changed by heat or pain, but shaped by growth. Her eyes no longer carried confusion, they held certainty. Her body no longer fought itself, it stood tall and ready. And her voice, when she spoke to Mark, held the sound of someone who had made her choice. "They will take me, and they will try to undo what has already become part of me. They will say I have been infected or broken. They will try to restore me to who I was, but I am no longer that person, and I do not wish to return." Mark listened closely and spoke without hesitation. "Then we will not let them take you, not like that. Not if this is who you want to be." Lura nodded, but she knew it was not a fight they could win through force. Her people did not respond to emotion, they followed data, facts, logic. But what if she gave them data they could not ignore? What if she proved that what happened was not corruption, but evolution, not chaos, but discovery? She rushed back to her lab, the place where her journey began. She opened her encrypted Files she compiled every detail of her reaction, every scan, every emotion, every memory. She wrote a full report on how human scent molecules interacted with her biology and triggered ancient instincts. She added her own emotional logs, her dreams, her responses, her choices, not just as a scientist, but as a sentient being with the right to grow. She sent it directly to the council ship. Just before their retrieval team arrived and stood waiting as the doors opened and her people stepped in. With masks over their faces and tools in their hands, ready to treat her like a threat. But before they could speak, she raised her hand and addressed them, not as a subject, but as a voice of knowledge. I am not malfunctioning. I am not broken. I have experienced a reaction that reveals a forgotten part of who we are. This is not contamination. It is a path we once walked before fear closed the doors. If you remove me, you remove the truth I have uncovered. If you silence this, you deny the future. Its chance to understand. Her words stunned them, not because they were emotional, but because they were clear, supported by evidence, backed by experience. Even her expression held no fear, only calm strength. Mark stood beside her, saying nothing, but his presence alone told them she had not faced this alone, and that made a difference, a small one, but enough to delay their action. The council officers paused their order. They requested a full review of her report. They would return with a ruling in 2 planetary cycles, and until then, she would remain on the station under-monitored. Freedom but free, nonetheless not confined, not erased. And though the future remained uncertain, the moment felt like a victory, not just for her, but for the space between species that had now been opened by something as simple as a breath of air and a shared room. Weeks passed slowly after that, but the pressure began to fade, and in its place something new began to grow. She and Mark did not rush into connection. They walked slowly through shared days, quiet meals, light conversations. She returned to her research, but with a new purpose: not to study Earth samples, but to study the bridge between instinct and emotion, between alien biology and human presence. And she found in that space a piece she had never known. Her people still watched, still questioned, still doubted, but they also began to wonder, and for the first time in generations, they added a new word to their medical library. Not disease, not anomaly, but awakening. Lura stood once again at the observation deck, watching the stars slide past in their endless dance. Mark stood beside her, arms folded. Quietly they said nothing for a while, just breathed in the same air and let the silence hold them gently. She smiled faintly and said, I think the universe is much wider than I believed. And he replied, maybe it always was. We just needed to stop following maps and start feeling our way forward. And in that moment, Lura knew the fire inside her had not been a curse, but a key, and what it unlocked was not just biology or heat, but the beginning of something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. A new chapter, born not from control, but from choice, not from history, but from hope. The end.